Are you going on the adventure today? Yes, you are, my friend. Let's go see Richard Lewis. What do you say? Daze with Jordan the Lion. You and Katie begins now. The Temple of Aaron Cemetery. Even if the front gates are locked, the back gates are open, so we're gonna go around and enter through there. So here we are at the Temple of Aaron Cemetery in Roseville, Minnesota, just outside of St. Paul, and we are here to visit the final resting place of the great Richard Lewis, comedian, humorist, born in Brooklyn, New York. It's kind of surprising that he's out here, but for as neurotic as he was, I found out about him from watching like the Showtime and HBO comedy specials, the mid-'80s. I would stay up late, and I remember seeing one of his and just thinking he was so funny because he was so crazy. He was always pacing back and forth.
I'm not very religious, but my friend moves there. Nashville, unbelievable, this country and western, crazed, you know. His son, he lip-synced the bar mitzvah.
I had seen George Carlin before that, and he didn't do that, so it was kind of cool to take in different styles of comedy. And Richard would always kind of talk about his horrible time with intimacy and his relationships, and he was the younger of his siblings, so he was with his mom more of the time, and he said he felt like they had a weird relationship where he never understood her and always thought that his birth must have been a complete mistake. But he is buried here because he did find a love of his life, Joyce Lipinski, and they met at a Ringo Starr album release party in, I believe, 2004. And her family's from here, and she went to school here and is buried, or is going to be buried out here in her family plot. So when he was talking about eventually dying and where he'd be buried, he was talking about being buried in Hollywood, of course, because he wanted people to come visit him. And she told him, you know, if you get buried in Minnesota with me, you're gonna have more people have to make a pilgrimage to come find you, come see you, because you'll be the most famous person in that cemetery. And so that kind of won him over. Kind of sounds like something crazy that would have happened on Curb Your Enthusiasm, actually. But he is buried just back here, and recently actually passed away earlier this year from a heart attack. He'd been suffering from or with Parkinson's for the last 2 years, or maybe even longer. That's when he kind of let the world know, but he was a funny guy. His start was, he was born, like I said, in New York, but he was raised in Jersey, and his dad owned a catering company, and his mom was like a local theater actor, like community theater. So he got the kind of the love of performing probably from her side. But when he ended up going off to school, he went to Ohio State University, got a degree in marketing, and then moved to New York City, got an advertising job in the copyright department. And while he was doing that, he started performing stand-up comedy in Greenwich Village. And while he was there doing that, that is where he was discovered by comedian David Brenner, who offered to help Richard out if he went out to Los Angeles. So Richard ended up going out to Los Angeles, and David Brenner got him into the comedy clubs and got him on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, which led to a pretty fantastic career. He ended up on all the late night talk shows eventually, from Letterman to Howard Stern, all those Carson appearances. Would do several stand-up specials for HBO, Showtime. And then I Kind of remember him from his very first show on Fox. It was with Jamie Lee Curtis. It was called Anything But Love. It was on for several years, and then when it ended, they ended up putting him in a show with Don Rickles called Daddy Dearest or something like that. I'll have to look and see what it was called, but they were basically playing father and son living together again. Richard always holds a kind of a soft spot in my heart because when I was a kid and Robin Hood Men in Tights came out in theaters, I loved all the Mel Brooks movies I had seen up to that point. My mom let me have all of my friends go to the theater for my birthday party. So we all went and saw that movie together, and I remember him being the squeamish Prince John in that movie. His stand-up was a lot about his kind of crazy behaviors or his inability to connect with women or just intimacy issues, things like that. But he also would end up talking about his drug addiction, alcohol addiction that he dealt with for many years. And it actually kind of culminated in 1994. He ended up overdosing on cocaine, had to be rushed to the emergency room. And that same year, he was filming Wagons East with John Candy, and John Candy unexpectedly had a heart attack and died on the last days of the filming of the movie. So that had a profound effect on him, and that's when he ended up deciding to give up all the drugs and alcohol. But we've been just loving him on Curb Your Enthusiasm. That's kind of a crazy lifelong friendship that we'll talk about. So Katie, I don't know if I've told you this about Richard Lewis, because we've been watching all these Curb Your Enthusiasms, just loving this show. I don't know if you watched it much before, but I've always loved the kind of crazy behavior of Larry, and Richard is the perfect catalyst for his humor. They actually were born in the same hospital 3 days apart. Then Richard moved to New Jersey and went to school, and his dad was a caterer and everything, but he sent him off to a summer camp when he was 12 years old, and Larry David was at that camp, and they hated each other. And then 10 years later, they found each other in the comedy circuit in New York and became friends again. And then till their dying day, you know, Larry even said after Richard passed, he said, he was maybe the sweetest man I ever knew, and I just can't believe he's gone. So,
which is so weird of him to say that. If you've ever seen Curb Your Enthusiasm, these two are just the zaniest pairing
bickering
you'll ever, just
constantly.
Bickering. There's a great moment where Richard is telling Larry how much he loves him, and he's like, "I'm writing you into the will," and Larry's like, "No, I don't want it. I don't want your money.
He's like, "I got my own money.
Yeah,
leave it to somebody else."
They are fighting about it. So it is just, you will fall down a rabbit hole just listening to the two of these guys just bickering like to the bitter end.
Yeah, Richard's saying,
hilarious.
He's going, "Come on, Larry, I want you to know how much I loved you after I'm gone." He goes, "I don't want your money." And Larry's actually getting ready to like hit a golf ball, and Richard goes, "You know what, F you, Larry." Larry goes, "No, F you, Richard."
Oh,
then of course
God.
they wrote in, you know, Richard had to have a kidney operation. He had to have a transplant, and they put that on the show as well, where Larry's friends all take the test to see if any of them are compatible donors, and of course Larry is, and Larry's the one that loses the coin flip or the eeny meeny miny mo, and ends up having to give the kidney, and then he doesn't want to, and it's, I mean, just so funny. It was a perfect place for their friendship. All the storylines they wrote in. I remember when Larry was boycotting a coffee place, and Richard said, "I will never go there with you as long as I live." And then the next day, Larry's walking by and sees Richard inside. He said, "I told you, I'll never go there with you." So
ever again.
This is, you know, crazy enough, it was kind of one of those things. Richard was already established long before Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I think he'll probably end up going down being known for a lot of that, because even though he was part of that new big comedy bang, this generation of like Richard Klein and Lily Tomlin, where they were feeling like we were going to see this whole new style of comedy, which we did. But then, you know, Curb Your Enthusiasm went on for 20 years, and they were constantly reinventing the walls of comedy and what you could do in comedy. I remember one of the episodes, Richard Lewis is dating a woman that has this sob story about her mother dying. So Larry ends up she's cold, and Larry ends up loaning her a mink stole, and then when he finds out that he thinks she's lying about the story and Richard and her break up, he wants the stole back, and it's the battle as to whether or not Richard should get involved and get the stole back for him, or if you can take back a gift once you've given it. I love those two together in that show, so great to come out here and visit Richard and pay a little bit of respects to him, making the long journey like he wanted. Too bad. Said he did die peacefully though, in his home. He'd had a heart attack the day before. And it was in actually the last season of Curb. They knew they were going to wrap it up, and he was able to be in, I believe, one episode. That's so right. You reminded me of that funny part in Robin Hood Men in Tights. You want to say it?
There's that great shtick that goes throughout the movie where he has a mole that goes to a different part of
It's always moving.
It's always moving, and it's like right at the end, and he has probably the best dry wit of anyone you'll ever see. Right at the end, he actually says, "I have a mole?" And I just remember, I'm like, that literally was something you laughed about through the entire movie, and they finally just kind of gave it that chef's kiss right at the end, and he just delivered that so well. He's so funny in that show.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Richard Lewis. So his wife will be buried here next to him when she passes. To me, it's just kind of like so appropriate that Curb Your Enthusiasm ended and was already, was already planned to, but I just think that's so perfect that the show couldn't go on without Richard. Thank you everyone for watching. If you're in Roseville, Minnesota, make sure that you come out and visit Richard Lewis. If you're wondering where his headstone is, I believe Shelley Winters once told me that it was Jewish tradition to wait a year, so they're probably waiting that year. But he passed away February 27th, 2024. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.